Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Healthy Perspective podcast. Today we have Hally Brooke. She is a founder and CEO of Nourished. She is a certified functional medicine nutrition counselor, nationally board certified health and wellness coach, Fox 21 fitness and nutrition expert, and fierce industry advocate. Her self-education in nutrition and exercise began in 2014 when she battled and overcame her own serious GI issues, including IBS and SIBO. Through her own process of finding wholeness, health, and healing for herself, as well as her education experience with her clients, Hally has learned that living a nourished life takes more than just eating healthy or working out. Hally teaches that true health is a blend of not only physical health, but also mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being, and that sometimes health looks like enjoying a burger instead of a salad or taking a nap instead of going on a run. From that experience, she's built a thriving functional medicine coaching practice that works with clients in all key areas of wellness, including movement, nutrition, mindset, resilience, relationships, and self-care. Her life mission is to encourage, empower, and free women by teaching healing, whether as clients, through speaking events, business coaching, or personally with the people she encounters. She lives and breathes this mission day in and day out. Hally, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. It's wonderful to be here.
And I get so excited when I get to bring another health professional on that's also an entrepreneur, because that blends like really the audience of, who I reach out to. I can't help but talk about health, whether it's a metaphor or analogy, whatever it is. I can't help but talk about entrepreneurship because they go so, hand in hand.
Hand in hand, yes.
So I think this is going to be an amazing conversation with people. Where I always like to start is let's just start with get to know you. Where did this mission, vision and whatnot start from? We were talking a little bit off air, and you were an educated person. You wanted to go pre-med, so you're interested in health. Where did all that passion and whatnot come from?
Yeah, great question. Always interested in health. Thought I wanted to do pre-med, ended up teaching math for 9 years. So that was kind of like a hard left turn. Mm-hmm. And then it really came from, I got sick myself. I got IBS and SIBO. And back when I got diagnosed, there just weren't good options. There still aren't good options. I did an internship with a GI doctor who said, IBS is what we diagnose people with when we don't know what's wrong with them and we don't have a drug to fix it. And that's still the case. Gosh. Yeah. So anyway, I was basically told that feeling the way I felt was the rest of my life. And if I wanted to feel good, I could eat, plain chicken and lettuce. And that was going to be that. And I was 24 at the time. And I just thought there has got to be a different answer. Yeah. that cannot be where we left it. Yeah. So I went and I saw several other doctors and just couldn't get any answers. And so I kind of dove into functional medicine unintentionally on my own, just in Google, trying to figure out what the heck was going on with me and how I could fix it. Stumbled into functional medicine, was able to really heal myself through that, and a lot of prayer. Both of those together were what fixed it. So it's not just me, but it's the Lord too.
I love it.
Yeah. Ended up coming out the other side and going, oh my gosh, this is what I need to do. In that process, I transitioned from teaching to personal training, and I'm a nerd. So I'm talking to my clients about what I'm learning and nutrition and food and all of this. And they just go, you have to go back to school. So I did. I went back to school and started a company, and here we are.
And the story is always strongest when it comes from like a super strong purpose and why. And there's nothing stronger than I was sick and I didn't know what to do. There's got to be other people like that out there.
Tons.
So a lot of people they know what personal training is. You go to a gym or you have a home fitness, that's pretty self-explanatory. But now starting to dive into functional nutrition, like you mentioned, there's so many different perspectives and outlooks and ways to practice that. How have you, what approach have you taken, if somebody calls you and they want a functional med, consultation or whatnot? What's kind of the approach that you're taking?
Yeah. So the first thing we do is we figure out if we actually can help them. That's super important to me. I don't want to work with someone who we can't help. And we've got about a 60 plus referral list of people that we refer out to. So I always tell people we're a great place to start with, because if we can't help you, we will find someone who can. But that's step one is, is what you're dealing with in our scope of practice, and are we actually the best person to help you? And then if we are the best person to help you, we start with a 60-minute intake and we go birth till now, your whole health history, emotional, social, the whole thing, because it all goes together. Every single piece of who you are and what has gotten you to where you're at. I think so many, traditional medicine practitioners, and I'm a huge fan of Western medicine, so I don't want anyone to hear me bashing Western medicine. Yeah. But because of the way it's set up, you go in for a 30 to 15 minute sit down and your doctor's goal is to write you a prescription and get you out and get to the next patient. That's not our goal. Our goal is to sit down with you and hear what's happening in your life, because all of those pieces make a difference. Whether you were breastfed or bottle fed determines what your microbiome is now. If you went through a really traumatic time in your life, we have clients who come to us and say, yeah, I felt totally fine until this car accident. And then I've done all the things, like I've done physical therapy and gone to chiropractic, like nothing's wrong with my neck anymore, but I can't digest food. And no one is connecting those dots. So 60-minute birth till now. And then we do a week of tracking. So we have them track their food, their mood, and their poop, which people always laugh. But I can tell most things I need to know about what's happening in your body by you telling me about your food, your mood, and your poop. So we track that for a week. And then we put together what we call a functional medicine game plan, which I say is a stack of concrete stepping stones to get you from where you're at to where you want to be. And then we kind of step into that coach role of, we're not going to lay a path all at once. We're going to lay it one step at a time. So of these things, whether it's diet or exercise or a gut healing protocol or, improving your adrenal health, where do you want to start? What works for your life? And then we go from there.
I love it. And you're right. We don't want to go about bashing Western medicine, because they're very helpful when you break a leg or when you have a huge laceration or, whatever. But we can teach people you don't have to live life dependent on them, because they're not going to help give you the answers that you want at a root cause. Because like you said, their goals are to use prescriptions. They're not taught in school the things that we're taught, how the body works and why you might be having symptoms and the root cause of things and whatnot. And so it's a very good distinction where it's like, still have a relationship with your medical doctor. It's not about Xing them out and bashing this, because usually the person has good intentions.
Oh yeah.
It's the system that doesn't allow them to practice in a way that, I don't know, is more of a root cause, honoring the body's created self-healing, self-regulating mechanisms. And so we just we're not going to say that system doesn't work, let's create a new one. It's just like, let's just go after a different goal. The goal isn't maybe exactly figuring out giving you a diagnosis, but you have these symptoms. Let's figure out what creates these symptoms. And then when we know what creates them, okay, now let's either give you something or take something out. It's really not terribly scientific as much as it is common sense with nature. Let's just recognize that the body is working this way for a reason. It's intelligent. It's doing it not because it just wants to be a problem or a pain in the butt, but because it needs help. That's all symptoms are. I need help. Please, somebody recognize this. And it's interesting when you think about how, I don't know, calloused or numb, or, if you want to be extreme, more like ignorant we are to nature's signals. I'm a farmer. If you look at my hands, I guess they're fairly clean right now, but they usually have poop and all the stuff on it from all the stuff that we're doing, out there. And the more you're out with nature, the more you start to recognize rhythms of life. But because we've become so busy, we're not even recognizing the rhythms of life, let alone the rhythms of our own bodies. I think, and I wonder if you hear this too. You have your classic, midlife 40 to 50-year-old gal, maybe premenopausal, something like that, has eaten the same thing for all these years, has taken this blood pressure medication for 20 years, whatever it is. And they're like, and I never had a problem before, but now I have a problem. And it's like, well, maybe because you've done the same darn thing for 20 years that your body's like, I've had it. It's not that you went out of your way to hurt your body, but maybe your body reached a point where it can't adapt anymore.
Right.
Why don't you speak to kind of that principle of adaptability as related to the microbiome?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so our microbiome, man, there's so many directions I could take that question. I could talk for an hour. Let me dial that in. Our microbiome is as unique as our fingerprint, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
And our microbiome is all anaerobic bacteria. So it's bacteria that's really hard to culture outside of our body. So there are microbiome tests that are $850 that you can go take. But the better way to figure out what's going on in your gut is to actually, I call it insourcing. We outsource our health and wellness so often, but insource our own health and wellness and pay attention to, gosh, if I eat that food, I get really gassy. Okay. Let's see, I'm constipated all the time. I could go do an $800 test to have someone tell me that I have methane producing bacteria, or I know that constipation is usually caused by methane producing bacteria. So let's adjust that. I think, I had a client, this is one of my favorites. He's awesome. I work with men and women. I primarily work with women, but men come to me too. I had a client last summer who is in the trades field in construction, super crazy busy during the summer, and then doesn't hardly work at all during the winter. Came to me and he's like, I am pooping myself 7 times a day. Like I just have the runs and I cannot get it together and I don't know what's wrong. And so, we did our whole intake, we did our week of tracking. And I said to him, I think it's stress. Your cortisol is so high right now, and your cortisol directly affects your microbiome. It affects that bacteria instantly. And your stress is so high right now that your body cannot regulate. It cannot adapt. And so instead of adapting, it's just trying to get rid of your cortisol and your stress as quickly as possible, which means you're pooping like the runs 5 times a day. He's like, yeah, I had to go dig a hole behind my truck the other day, like on a client's property.
That's terrible.
He couldn't make it. Yeah.
Oh,
and so,
Lord.
That would be a client who would probably go to a doctor and be put on, I've seen doctors prescribe Pepto-Bismol for stuff like that, and they wouldn't actually address the root cause. And so I said to him, we have to deal with your stress. You cannot make it through the rest of this summer functioning like this, or you can, and you can keep digging holes with your client. That's fine. If you feel
just add a bonus for free fertilizer along with your landscaping.
Totally. By the way, under your concrete patio is like my turd. You're welcome.
Right. You're welcome.
And not a turd, like whatever.
A puddle.
Yeah. Or you can work on your stress. And he was so skeptical at first. He's like, no, like I just need a drug. And I was like, I actually just need you to learn how to breathe. I need you to set an alarm on your phone and breathe 3 times a day. And he did. And just with that one thing, we got him down from pooping 7 times a day to pooping twice. And I was like, all right, cool. Are you bought in now? And so then we started working in some of these other pieces, some supplementation and some probiotics to kind of help balance that out. But you could take probiotics for the rest of your life. And if the issue is stress and you're not adapting to stress, you're going to keep pooping behind your client's car.
It's going to be fantastic. And that's best case scenario. I'm like, what if you work in a mall or something like that?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
You're
or
a
a school.
hairstylist.
If you're a teacher, I remember when I was sick, thank goodness I had a good rapport with my students, and my classroom was right next to the bathroom. But I remember I would have to get them started on something and just run to the bathroom and hope nothing blew up and hope my supervisor didn't walk into my classroom, because I didn't have an option. Like, what was I going to do?
Right.
Yeah. So that's obviously an extreme example, and there's everything in between. But yeah, if your body's not adapting, it's going to affect you dramatically.
Good.
I was also just going to say, to go back to what you were talking about before, listening to our body's warning systems. I tell my clients, if your fire alarm started going off right now, you would go turn the fire alarm off, but then you would also try to figure out what set it off. Is it out of batteries, or is there actually a fire? You wouldn't go just turn it off and then let the kitchen burn down. But that's what we do with our bodies all the time. I talk about eczeema and psoriasis. Eczema and psoriasis are fire alarms. And there's so many commercials on TV right now, talking about basically immunosuppressants to deal with eczema and psoriasis. I said, do you ever wonder why your immune system is so out of whack that it's causing eczema and psoriasis? Let's go there. This drug can turn off the fire alarm, but your kitchen is still burning down. So let's go put the fire out.
Yeah. And then the scary thing is you take these drugs and you cover up the fire alarm long enough and it's going to stop working. So the thing is healed, but then now you have a burnt up kitchen. Now you can never cook again. You're working your way to damage that you might not be able to fix later on, or it's going to take twice as long if you got to do a full rebuild or whatever it is.
Exactly. Can I give you an example for that?
Yeah.
So we have a client right now who has been on an SSRI, so a depression medication, since she was 17, which I'm a big fan of depression medication when it's needed. It saves people's life and it is helpful, but it's probably not forever. So this girl was put on it when she was 17 because she had a hard breakup and her mom just didn't want her to be sad. So instead of being okay, being sad at 17 for breaking up with your boyfriend, she got put on an SSRI. Now she's 34 and she can't get pregnant. And everything else in her lifestyle looks like she should be fertile. Everything should be working. But SSRIs over long-term periods have fertility issues. So now we're talking about, she's been on that since 17. Now she's 34 and she can't get pregnant. We have to now help her slowly taper off that. And that's not what we do. Like, we're health coaches, so we work with a PCP to do that.
Sure.
But we have to educate her about, like, this is actually probably what's happening. So what needs to happen is we need to start tapering you off that, which is a hard process because it's been regulating your emotions now for 2 decades. So that's going to cause some issues. And then we have to get that out of your body and help you detox so that you actually can get pregnant. Just like, and the things we don't think about, like, I was sad, so I went on this at 17 and now I've been on it and here's the result.
Right. And it's just reactive thinking. It's not actually being proactive with your health and wondering, wow, 20 years from now, I wonder if there's going to be an effect or, something like that. And I think that's where the medical system, as we've seen with COVID, really be detrimental on population as a whole, where if you're just reactive, where when you don't need to be reactive, you're sad. Okay, well, let's give you some strategies. Let's do this and that. Yeah. If nothing else works, then let's get you over the hump. But this isn't something that's going to be a lifestyle for you, or you want to be dependent upon, like, you don't break your bone, cast it and leave it casted the rest of your life. So you never break it again. Like, it doesn't make any sense, Otherwise, we'd have a whole bunch of people walking around like tubes, all day long.
I would be one of them. Yep.
That's how they treat medicine. It's just this thing. Now you take it forever. Now you're stuck on it. And, I when I talk with my patients, so we measure infrared thermography and surface EMG. And how I explain it to my patients is we're measuring the current load of stress in your nervous system through this particular window. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, but this is the way that makes the most sense to me as a chiropractor. Everybody has a high level to adapt. We're humans. We can live in Antarctica. We can live in Southern California. We have a high level of adaptability. But if your stress is taking up most of that 24/7, now your adaptability becomes very low. You guys can't see you're on video, but I'm making a very small window with my hand. And so if you try to run your normal life within that very small window, something's going to break, whether it's a bone or whether it is some sort of a symptom. And so what Hally's saying and what I'm saying is it's not necessarily about squeezing more life in that tiny little window or doing a drug or taking some magical supplement to where you don't feel the problem. And then it's about let's empty the bucket of stress, whether that lives in your microbiome, whether that lives in your nervous system, whether that lives in your mental, spiritual, emotional state, which are all tightly intertwined. Let's empty that out so that way you can live what your potential was created to be, not a shell of that. And that's the definition of life. Like, the more adaptable you are, those 70-year-olds running marathons and whatnot. It's like, it's not that any 7-year-old can't run a marathon. And this person is highly adaptable because they've cultivated adaptability within their life. And I think that's something that's been hard with, and we can take this conversation multiple directions too, but you look at especially Americans' desire for comfort. Whether it's basic things like AC or having a temperature regulation, all the way down to our food, like having super sterilized dairy processes or super sterilized meat or whatever it is. It's like you get to a point where nothing's alive anymore. How is your body supposed to adapt with dead food kind of going into you? How do you like, let's take that construction worker who's downing probably a monster and all that other stuff. How do you ask the right questions or introduce the concept of, like, what you put into your body is the life expression that you're going to get out of it? Like, how do you start to rewire, it's not just food till you fill up, but it's fuel for every part of you.
Yeah, that's such a good question. You guys missed it. We were talking offline before we jumped on about like, if practitioners in our space who just keep going to school and keep going to school and keep going to school, the answer to that question is the magic of coaching. So I have a nutrition background and that's great, but my knowledge about nutrition doesn't affect change in my clients. Like, I can know everything, but if I can't get them to buy into it, it's kind of useless. So how do I do that? A huge piece of that is starting with that food, mood, poop journal. So right out of the gate, when someone comes to us, we're having them track what they're putting in their body, how it's affecting their energy and how it's affecting their mood, and then what's coming out the back end. And so I'm looking at that from a clinical perspective to see, okay, what's happening. But my first question in that game plan review session that I have with them is, what did you notice about what's going on in your body. And every single client I've worked with so far usually answers that exact question. Like, gosh, well, I noticed that I crash pretty much every day at 2:00. And I noticed that I'm eating a lot of carbohydrates. I didn't really realize that before. Like, oh, interesting. And so it's asking them the questions to start noticing, insourcing, right? Start noticing what's happening in their body. And oftentimes I'll have conversations, we work with clients. I had a client who was on a diet since she was 13 and she came to me at 56 and she's been on a diet the whole time. And so before we could even start diving into the process of losing weight, we had to help her realize that she's been outsourcing her own health, wellness, and weight to something her whole life. She's been outsourcing how much she eats to an app. She's been outsourcing what she eats to the latest fad on Google. She's been outsourcing like every single piece of her nutrition in her life and the way that she's functioning. She's been outsourcing. So step one is to ask the question, hey, how do you know when you're full? And people who've been on diets their whole life are like,
my cell phone tells me.
Like when my phone tells me I've maxed out on my calories. And so then I ask them, I'm like, okay, well, you maxed out on your calories. Were you full? And a lot of times they're like, I don't know. Yeah. And so, there's a ton of questions that I use to ask that, but one of them is, what did you notice? One of them is, when are you full? When you eat that, how do you feel? I hear you say that you're exhausted all the time. What do you do when you're exhausted? Oh, I drink a Monster. Okay. Is there something else you could try? Well, yeah, I could try this. Okay, sweet. Like, let's try that for a week and see if it works. I let my clients do experiments all the time. Let's do an experiment. Instead of drinking a Monster, let's like take a 15-minute power nap. And then we come back and we say, how'd that go? They go, I actually feel really good. Oh,
crazy.
Great. Yeah. So it's this like kind of sneaky process of, I know that drinking a Monster is not the best way to get energy, but me knowing that doesn't change anything for my client. They have to learn how to know that for themselves. And that's the magic of what we do.
And that's probably the most frustrating part of the practitioner, because it's like right away, it's like, you do this, this, and this, you're going to get better. Have a good day. Like, but it's like, okay, we got to take it slow. Like, you don't care about this as much as I do. How do I make you? And it's like, how do we care more about what you're putting into your body than you? Like, you're the ones feeling it. Like, it's so interesting. And like you said, it's because it's been outsourced. They haven't had the care. They've had somebody else, in a sense, quote unquote, care for them. And so that's an interesting concept where it's like they really don't care, but they haven't had to do that. It's like,
or they do care, but they don't know how. Like even with medical professionals, like you go to the doctor because you want to feel better, but you're going to the doctor tells you what to do. That's still outsourcing. That's still like, I have to go to someone else to figure out what to do. And then if that person isn't telling me what to do, I don't know what to do. Like if that doesn't work, like I want to get better, but I don't know how. I think about, part of my business is we provide health coaching to practitioners. So like we come into practitioners' offices. And they put the whole plan together, and then we just step in and help someone operate it on a Tuesday. Like, okay, my doctor told me that I need to lower my A1C. And then they sent me home and you're like, good luck.
Right.
Like, okay, now
diet
on a
exercise.
Tuesday. Exactly. Like, cool. Diet and exercise. What does that actually mean on a Tuesday when all I have in my pantry are Oreos and spaghetti? And that's all I have ever eaten since I was born. That's what I was raised on. It's like,
which is amazing that you made it that far. Let's just recognize the body's ability to take Oreos and spaghetti and make this.
Talk about adaptive. Heck yeah. Yeah. So
go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
on Tuesday, you come in.
Just like, what do you do on a Tuesday? How do you actually make the changes that I want to make? Like I see clients all the time who they really want to change and they really want to do something different, but they have no idea how. And they've Googled stuff so much that they're like, over Googled. I had a client. Okay, I'll tell you one more story and then we can keep going. I had one client who I just absolutely loved. She's Italian by birth, came to us and had literally tried every diet on the planet. Like she tried Atkins and keto and low carb and Beachbody and like, you name a diet, food in the box, like she'd done it. And she just could not lose weight no matter what she did. So I said, okay, cool. Let's do a food, mood, poop journal. Let's see what's happening. And she's eating almost no carbohydrates.
Wow.
I don't know if Italian by birth has anything. People would say like blood type diet. I don't totally buy into that, but sure. She's Italian by birth. And there were 3 days where she had a little bit higher carbohydrates than other days. And she felt awesome on those days. And the days that she had no carbohydrates, she felt terrible. And I said, all right, cool. How about we do a 2-week experiment where you increase this category of macros, increase your carbohydrates by this much, and let's just see what happens. And of course she freaked out. She's like, but that's the absolute opposite of everything I've ever Googled. Yeah. And I was like, how many pounds can you gain in 2 weeks? If it doesn't work, right. We can just cut the carbs out and you'll lose them again. Right. She was like, okay, I'll do it.
Oh my gosh.
So she did it and she lost 3 pounds. Because if you're not doing what's right for your body, we're not going to get
anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Moving the conversation a little bit, it's pretty easy to see if you have IBS and you change what you put in, most likely you're going to get some sort of symptomatic resolution. I think where people are having a little bit harder time, especially our medical professionals and whatnot too, is the mental emotional stuff. So someone has anxiety and depression and like those sort of things. And all you're saying is like, well, let's change up your diet. And like, well, how do you kind of start to explain to people like what you're putting in is not just going to affect, what comes out and how you feel there, but how does that interact, the microbiome? I'm sure you got brain connection and like all of those things.
Oh, that's one of my favorite things to talk about. I'm so glad you asked that.
Perfect.
Yes. So, I mean, the first one is, again, back to that food, mood, poop journal, getting comfortable with the fact that what you put in your body actually does have an output. Like food, mood, poop, I literally give people an emotions wheel, happy, angry, mad, sad. And they start to see this connection between, gosh, when I eat this, I'm irritable 2 hours later. So just making that connection is super powerful. And then we can get into the really nerdy, nitty gritty science. So 95% of our serotonin is actually created in our large intestine by the fermentation process that our bacteria does. That's crazy. So depression is treated with SSRIs, which selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. All that does is if someone's dealing with depression, they get put on an SSRI, whatever serotonin is already available in their body, it just prevents their body from reabsorbing it so that it's still available for their body. It doesn't actually increase serotonin at all. Well, how do we increase serotonin? We heal your gut and we start eating foods that produce serotonin. So once we get your gut functioning right, we have seen people be able to start to decrease antidepressant medications because their body is now actually producing what it needs to be producing. If 95% of your serotonin is created in your gut, why are we treating this as a brain problem? It's not a brain problem. Right. Anxiety is also a huge one. So let's see, how can I make this graspable? Go ahead.
And I'm guessing you're finding the same people that come to you for their IBS, you're asking them about their mood and they're like, oh yeah, I'm depressed, but that's just normal. Or that's anxiety. Like I'm guessing a pretty high percentage of people, if they come to you for anxiety, they also have IBS. If they come to you with IBS, they also have one of the other two.
Yes. Almost all the time across the board at some varying level. Yeah. The anxiety one is pretty wild. So our gut lining is 1 cell thick, which is crazy. When you think about, the skin under your eyes, that's 30 cells thick. So everything that is containing your food and your bacteria and your poop is 1 cell thick. And that's what keeps poop from leaking out into your body. And anxiety is often we can connect it to an immune response because an immune response is an activation in our body that tells our body that something is wrong, just like anxiety tells our body something wrong. I tell my clients all the time, fear is not a bad thing. Anxiety is fear that hasn't been dealt with. And sometimes that fear can come from the inside of our body. If our immune system is on high alert, every single time we eat, it has to go deal with the poop particles and the bacteria particles that should be contained and that aren't. That would make me anxious. Even, I don't have to have the knowledge behind that to understand the function that's happening in my body, that my body is freaking out. So am I. Yep.
And that's good. And you mentioned freaking out. It's like, that means you could have eczema. That's freaking out. That means you can have anxiety. That means you can have an autoimmune. That means like the freaking out is manifested in a whole bunch of different ways. But when you try to get to the root cause, it's like, you're right. If your internal body or your inside of your body freaking out. Now we just got to figure out why. Like it's a pretty simple, like, I don't know. It's when you break it down like this, it's like, why, how difficult would it be for medicine, to just ask those one or two more questions, like, I have eczema, can you help me? Like, what's your diet like? How much soda do you drink? How, like, let's try doing that first, and let's see. But there's no code for that. There's no way to bill for don't drink soda code. Like, you know what I mean? Like, which is that's the system that's messed up, where it's like, doctors need to get reimbursed for actually giving good advice rather than resorting to medication, because that's the only way they get paid,
Exactly.
Anyways, I digress.
No, it's so good. Just to throw something fun in there, there's a doctor who I do love, James. He goes by James Dini, but it's James D. Nicolatonio, James, something like that. But he has a quote that says, if you go to a doctor and they give you a prescription without asking you about your sleep, your exercise, your nutrition, or your relationships, you have a drug dealer, not a doctor. I was like, yes,
brutal.
Thank you. Yes.
Right. Yeah. And kind of diverting that, I keep on going back there. Wait, I promise I have great relationships with medical doctors. It's not like it just bugs me when this stuff is so anybody can listen to this and probably have a better idea of what's going on in their body by insourcing rather than asking somebody's, not that their professional opinion isn't worth something, but you're going to get further asking these type of questions than what drug do I need,
Exactly.
And it's interesting. I don't watch a lot of TV. It was probably a football game, but I saw a commercial advertising some medication, and the drug name was really bizarre and like hard for people to remember, obviously. And so it said on the bottom, ask the doctor for a little pink pill for, this, or, like something like that. Like, it's like conditioning people to be like, oh yeah, I thought this little pink pill can help with this. The guy was happily fishing, or, do whatever it is. It's like, it's just interesting. Those are the ways we're trained to think, like, maybe this pill can help me versus why am I experiencing, But anyways, going back into kind of like the gut, the microbiome, and the serotonin and whatnot. It's pretty interesting when you start to look at, we are like the mental emotional problem generation. I mean, not only did COVID accelerate that, but we've had more kids on, psychiatric medications than ever before. Even kids as little as, months old are being prescribed these things for similar issues that we have. Their guts are messed up and, whatever. And so it's interesting when you start to look back, like, what was different about, the food that even our parents or our parents' parents, started to eat and whatnot. And you look at the farming practices and you look at all these things, and everything has changed to this mass production, easily systematic mass acres of, monocropping, which causes you to change the soil, which changes the genetic makeup of the plants and, whatnot. And so I've had people ask me, well, why when I eat spinach or, this and that and the other, does it not have, like, why am I still deficient in it? Or why is my microbiome still not working? And I don't know. Have you studied glyphosate and like its effects on the microbiome and like, so the shikimate pathway and like all of those things? It just hit me. I thought people would find this interesting. So you mentioned our microbiome is what makes the serotonin, right? Yep. And so serotonin is a neurotransmitter. It needs a base of other amino acids in order to build it up, right? Yep. And so you have amino acids that we need to eat, and then we have some that we can already make from the inside. The few that we need to eat typically is what comes from healthy soils, right?
Yep.
The food that's been sprayed with glyphosate, which is darn near everything these days, the shikimate pathway is what it's affecting, which changes the plant's ability to make, what is it, tyrosine, phenylalanine, and tryptophan.
Yep.
Which are the base for serotonin, as well as all the other cortisol and all the other hormones, that we need as well. So people are like, why can I eat different and my mood change? Well, if you eat food that actually has the stuff that your body needs to build and not spaghetti and Oreos, you're actually going to be building up at the base level what your body needs to then express happiness, because happiness is a chemical concoction that our brain has a learned meaning. But if you don't have the chemicals, there's a glitch in the system, it's crazy. I don't know. I just thought of that tidbit while you were talking about that. It's like, if people just knew, why you have these things and why you have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, or, all these things from the food that we're eating, it's because the food that you're getting is petrol derived.
Yep.
It's monocultivated, so you're not getting any cofactors, coenzymatic activity. There's no life in it.
Right.
It's
There's
pure
no life
growth.
in it.
It's
Yep.
pure growth,
It's you explained the glyphosate part perfectly. So listeners, if you eat organic, please keep eating organic. But another fascinating piece that is linked in with that. So we used to think that really only vegans and vegetarians had a deficiency in vitamin B, because we thought that vitamin B12 came from animals. What we now know is that vitamin B actually comes from a bacteria in the soil. And so, vegans and vegetarians would wash that off and not eat it. The animals would be eating the grass and getting the bacteria. And so they were just passing it on to us. We now have 5 out of 7 people are deficient in vitamin B12, regardless of whether they eat meat or are vegetarian, because we have damaged the soil so much that bacteria can no longer live there. And so even cows who are eating dirt, we're not getting that B12 in our systems anymore. So, talk about something that is crucial for mental health, alertness, and dopamine production. B12 is up there, and 5 out of 7 people are deficient in it. What's the statistic on people who are on antidepressants? Like 5
super
out of
high
7.
too. About the same.
About the same, 5 and 7. So I mean, glyphosate in the shikimate pathway, industrial farming, and vitamin B. Magnesium is another huge one. Where I think it's 80% of the American population is deficient in magnesium. Same thing, because it's just not in the soil anymore and we're not getting it. And magnesium is required for 300 plus different biological functions in our body. So if we're not getting what we need for 300 biological functions in our body, you're probably not going to feel good.
And then you had the vitamin D problem.
Yeah.
Because we're not out there farming, because we're just stuck inside in our tech world, or whatever. It's like, so no magnesium, no vitamin D, no vitamin B12. That's a good recipe for autoimmune, cancer, neurodevelopmental issues. And then we pass that microbiome down to our kids.
Yep.
And then they're born C-section, and then they're not breastfed, and then they're given antibiotics for ear infections, and then they're given. It's like, no wonder we're in the show that we're in right now, where it's, kids are on medications, they're getting cancer, they're getting diabetes, they're getting myocarditis, they're getting all these things that we never heard of growing up. I mean, we brought our own cake and cookies and whatnot on our birthday, and now some kid's gonna die of a peanut allergy or an egg allergy, or something like that. Not being insensitive, but it's not normal. Like, these are foods that have been around for a long time. And there's a lot of stuff changing in our environment that's, it is making it tough to Google the right question, and I think that's where someone like you is really coming full circle, where you have somebody that wants to get better. They don't want a medication. They're aware of their symptoms, but there's so much information out there. What do we do to get back there? So if somebody does want to get a hold of you, Hally, and just say, hey, I'm done running on the rat race. I want some help. I want some accountability. Where does somebody find you?
So our website, you can book a free consult. So www.livenourished.coaching.com. You can book a free consult, and we'll jump on the phone with you and talk through all of these things, figure out if we can help you or if we have someone else who can help you, and start from there.
And if I don't live in Colorado, that's okay.
Anywhere. Yep. We, thank you, COVID. We used to only be in Colorado Springs, and we now all work from home, and we are nationwide, which is awesome.
It's phenomenal. Yeah, because part of the problem in a lot of these rural areas is healthcare.
Yeah.
And so you being able to go, as long as you have an internet connection, which is pretty much everybody since COVID, like you said, you can get help, and I don't know if you get into prices, but someone, might hear functional med and be like, well, they probably don't take insurance. That might not be affordable for me. So one, the consultation is free, which I'm guessing would be life-changing just based on the information. Just doing the mood journal is alone enough. You could probably insource a lot of it. But what is something like that cost? Let's say, IBS, 40 years old, just kind of your not run of the mill. I don't want to be, once again, dismissive, but like something that we see, day in and day out.
Yeah, man, that is such a good question. So we, as of this year, so like 12 months ago, have pivoted and intentionally to make it affordable, because functional medicine isn't covered by insurance. Occasionally someone can apply and get it reimbursed, but functional medicine really isn't covered. And most functional medicine doctors who I have found are 10,000, 15,000, 8,000. I mean, it's just insane.
Yeah.
So we have pivoted to memberships. So we have 3 tiers of memberships. It starts at $69, goes up to $297 per month. And we will work with you until you don't need us anymore. And I tell my clients, my job is to work myself out of a job. Like if you need me for the next 15 years, I have done something very wrong. Talk about insourcing. Like I need you to learn what's going on in your body. So we do it all based on memberships, and we do it that way to make it incredibly affordable, because most functional medicine practitioners who I have worked with in the past are absolutely, you have to take out a second mortgage on your house, and people do that because they're so desperate to get well. And I believe that financial health is an equal piece. If you're stressed about finances, your stress is going to mess up your microbiome. So,
and then you're just working yourself in a circle.
Then we're just working ourselves in a circle. So please don't take out a loan. Memberships make it really affordable. And then a free consult, pretty easy.
I love that. That's amazing. And it's interesting. I did the exact same thing in my chiropractic practice, and I was never the most expensive. I was always cash, but I was never the most expensive practitioner anyways. And we pivoted to membership. So ours is, for one person, is $149 a month. And then for the family, it's $259 a month. For the whole family to get as much care as they need. And my goal is the same. It's like, I want to see you frequently in the beginning, so that way you get better. But then you're coming in for maintenance, and you don't need me 2 or 3 or 4 times a week for 6 or 7 months. Like something is very wrong if we haven't got you, So even if you live in California and you want a chiropractic membership and functional, you can do both of them for under $500 a month, get in the top tier, and that's your whole family. Like, I mean, there's no excuse for people not. So I love that. I really appreciate, that mission, because that means it's selfless. It's not coming from, I have all this education now, how can I charge or make a bunch of money from? It's like, how can we help the most amount of people? And I commend you for that, because it's real easy, especially the real smart people, to get in their head and be like, I'm worth this much. And it doesn't mean that you're not, just because you don't charge that.
Right.
But the people are worth more than any amount of money that you could get back. And so that's awesome. I love that. I hope if you're listening to this call, you've valued. I know Hally and I could talk for another couple of days.
We really could.
And so maybe we'll we'll schedule a second one here and go into something a little bit more specific. But please give her website a call or a visit. Go check out a consultation if you are struggling. They're in it to help people. They're in it to make the world a better place. Really what it is. Because if humanity is healthier, happier, stronger, we're gonna not live in this divisive, world that's seemingly, you go around every corner and someone's trying to distract you or yell at you or say you're doing something wrong. And so join memberships and communities that are encouraging from the top down. I think Hally's is one of that. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been an honor.